Hello! Hi guys! Good to see all of you. But camera angle is perfect. Cameraman is saying the angle is not perfect. The angle is perfect. The left angle is better than the right angle. So if you carefully observe, the left angle looks slightly better. The hair falls perfectly out there. These are the little things that we've come to discuss. People out here are like, this is an international organization that is doing some international work on an international day. This is all true. But the real truth, the real reason why you're here, you already know it, and it's lovely seeing all of you, though I can't see any of you. These ridiculous jokes, these stupid scripts, and that unpaid intern who wrote it are the ones to blame for the next 1.5 hours. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, let me welcome you to a very special day. Today, the United Nations turns 75. An organization that started out with 51 countries as member states has now grown to 193. They provide foods to over 90 million people in about 75 countries. They have assisted more than 34 million refugees across the world and provided vaccination for 58 million children across the world. Today we come to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the world's largest intergovernmental organization. Now, to put things into perspective, this multilateral behemoth has won the Nobel Peace Prize 12 times. I applied for it 152 times and got rejected 153 times. There's a difference between me and the United Nations. This is a small little difference. People are like, why doesn't he stick to the script? There should be a script. Why doesn't he stick to it? But this is the script. Blame the unpaid intern. Don't blame me. But the important question that we must ask today, and I must ask this hard-hitting question because you think this is a very serious show. So I must ask that hard-hitting question, and to all the people who are watching this in Geneva and New York, quite honestly from the bottom of my heart, I want to ask you this. 2.5 million people dead in Cambodia. Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge was not stopped when it's supposed to be. 800,000 people killed in a massacre in Rwanda. Why in Darfur, in Bosnia, in Nigeria, and most recently the ISIS in Syria? Why has the organization, the international behemoth, been unable to act? All of these questions raise efficiency on this body. And my question to those who are watching, those officials who are watching, the government that is watching, basically no one's watching, just you and me. But to all those people who would probably be watching this, my real question is this. Does the Secretary General really have any power today? Is the Secretary General even in a position to effect any change? The organization that was made for maintaining peace and stability across the world has been unable to do so. But ladies and gentlemen, you can hate it. You may absolutely be an admirer and love this organization. But you definitely cannot ignore it. On behalf of the organization that mirrors the same goals of this multilateral behemoth, the same goal of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or the world is one global village, I, Rishabh Shah, welcome you on behalf of India's international movement to United Nations to United Nations at 75. Today, more than ever, the UN must be paying attention to Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, that guy, that funny guy, that dude, the same one, yeah, that one. Charles Darwin, that guy who said, it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent one that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change that will survive. As the world deals with an unprecedented crisis and where the definition of multilateralism is changing on a daily basis, what should the UN do to keep up pace? Today we will hear not from a blithering idiot who's wearing two different colors, sorry, three, and if you actually closely observe, it's four, but I'll leave it to you to judge. And public's wondering, saying, how is he hosting such an important thing? Very simple. I started the organization, some benefits, some perks. Yeah, as you can see down on the screen, no sponsors sponsored us. Then again, the important thing is we're always looking for sponsors. So if you know anybody, or if you're a sponsor, potential person with a lot of money, we're willing. Donations are right here, right here. Just put it in this box. Yeah, the camera guys. Just joking. But guys, without deviating, today we will hear from industry experts, from cinema icons, and from UN diplomats about what they feel about the United Nations being reformed. Because if they want to stay relevant, the UN must reform. Now we're talking today about India and the UN as well. And when you speak about India, you cannot speak about it without song and dance. Presenting to you from the studios of one of India's finest choreographers and dance gurus. Somebody who's an inspiration to millions of young people, not just because of the art and the craft that he possesses. It's not an art and craft technically if you go to see, but not because of the art and craft that he possesses, but more so because of the human being that he is. Boys and girls, along with these very specially abled students who are phenomenal, I've seen them personally and watched for them, his batch of wonder kids at Joy, and his main troupe that has performed all across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please put your hands together. Though I can't see them, please put your hands together for the one and only, from our sister organization and beloved advisor, Shamak Davar. Sun lo, sun lo, sun lo, legitimately sun lo.
चाहे कुछ भी हो जाए सबसे आगे निकलेंगे हम, चाहे हमको कोई रोके फिर भी रुकेंगे ना कभी हम। ये दिल लो जान ये हमारी शान, हिंदुस्तान हमारा, इसे जान लो पहचान लो ये गुलसिता हमारा। हम कल भी थे हम आज है और कल भी रहेंगे, हमें जान लो पहचान लो हमसे है ये जमाना। दुनिया ये तेरे कैसे नजारे, कहीं पे तूफान कहीं सितारे, रुकेंगे फिर भी ना हम। सुन लो दिल की धड़कन, समझो दिलों का बंधन। मंजिलें और भी रास्ते और भी साथ साथ हम चले, चलना ही जिंदगी। हौसले बढ़ गए फासले कम हुए, चाहे मंजिल हो करीब फिर भी रुकेंगे ना हम। सुन लो दिल की धड़कन, समझो दिलों का बंधन। सुन लो देश की धड़कन, जान लो देश का बंधन। सुन लो देश की धड़कन।
I don't know whether you can feel the goosebumps yet, but I can yet sense them. It's honestly these kind of performances that stand for what we do at the organization. The ability to break the word impossible into I am possible. It's these kind of performances that essentially not only give you and me goosebumps, but make us appreciate and understand the fact that when young people who are specially abled managed to put together something like that, I can only salute them and tell the ones who are watching on the other side that that same energy and that same enthusiasm hopefully rubs off on all of us. And this all starts with this one very special human being whom I must thank at this juncture. He's been a great mentor, guide and friend to the organization, and because of his energy and his enthusiasm, the world is today watching Sunlo. Honestly, Shamak sir, you are an inspiration to all of us, and I must thank you from the bottom of my heart for not just being associated to I.I.M.U.N and being a human being whom we can always fall back on and always seek counsel on, but for doing the stellar work that you're doing with the Victory Arts Foundation. I think what you've just done and that piece that we just saw speaks volumes for the man that you are. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this. And on behalf of the organization and all those viewers, please continue inspiring us through the wonderful work that you do, not just with joy and with your main troupe, but more specifically with the Victory Arts Foundation. And as we take a moment to ponder over how young people who are specially abled broke the word impossible, I'm going to slip into a small short break. Not that we have too many sponsors or for that matter have any sponsor for this, but the idea is let us for a second ponder over the fact how impossible was broken up into I am possible. Thank you. Very good evening to all the wonderful ladies and gentlemen watching this. All the segments that have gone by have been wonderful, but if there has been one segment that I've been waiting for, it's this segment. You know, and the reason why I'm waiting for this segment is two reasons. One is there are thunderstorms that are taking place in the media today in India, but at the same point in time, I think there are a lot of thunderstorms taking place in Mumbai city. The second reason, Delhi, which was having perfectly great weather, is now a place that you can't step out. There is such bad air quality in Delhi that it's become impossible to step out. You, of course, understanding what I'm hinting at, it is the fact that climate change is a crisis that we must solve. Today, to discuss one of the most pressing issues of our time, I have two people whom I greatly revere and admire. One person who has served the UN for almost 10 to 15 years, and before that in various international organizations, and his work on climate crisis spans over 4 decades. The other person, of course, is a Bollywood superstar. So she doesn't need much of an introduction, but let me start with the good lady on the panel. She's an actor, a cause ambassador for One World initiative that we took, saying that, you know, 1 week, 1 day is not enough. Let's celebrate 1 week for the environment. She's also a climate warrior and has done tons of things when it comes to climate change. She's somebody who's using her fame and popularity for good. It's a pleasure and a privilege to have you with us, Sonakshi Sinha.
Thank you so much, Rishabh. You're too kind.
And the second panelist that we have today with us is somebody who's, again, like I did mention, is really special because he served with His Excellency Ban Ki-moon. He was the former Assistant Secretary General of the UN. He has been a part of the World Council of Churches and is greatly credited for making climate change a priority under the former SG. His Excellency Janos Pasta, if I've got that right, welcome to I.I.M.U.N.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate being part of this conversation, and I look forward to it.
So let me start with the conversation with the first question that I have actually, which is, you know, global temperatures worldwide, the temperature has gone up by about 1.14 degrees Celsius. From the 1890s to today, 2016 was the hottest year yet. We've lost about 28 trillion tons of ice between 1994 and 2020. And it is said that the water levels may rise up to about 3 feet by the end of the century. Today, we live in a world where everyone puts their country first and then everything else. The United Nations is yet, however, dependent on different member states. But the problem is the fact, and this is the first question that I wanted to ask, and to Mr. Janos first, if that's all right. I wanted to ask him, saying, in a country first world, the United Nations, how will it navigate the problem of climate change being a hoax? Because so many of the countries that fund the UN do not necessarily believe in the fact, their world leaders do not, the leaders that lead these countries do not believe in the fact that climate change is even real. How do you think the United Nations should navigate this, is my first question.
Well, thank you for this. This is really important. So first, let's be very clear about the science. This is not a hoax. There is overwhelming scientific evidence through analysis, through modeling, and increasingly through observing the real and current impacts of climate change. Look at you mentioned yourself, the excessive heat in Delhi, and there are many other places in the Arctic. Look at the loss of glaciers in the Himalayas and the Alps. Look at the forest fires in Australia, in California, Indonesia, and the list can go on. So the impacts are here, and just tell the people who are impacted, who lost their homes, who lost their livelihoods, that it's a hoax. It is not. So there is clearly scientific evidence. Now, let's also be clear that most of the governments in the world, most of the nations in the world accept that climate change is real and it's serious, and that humanity needs to do something about it. There are some governments who don't. There are some who have left, for example, the Paris Agreement, and there are some leaders who are against this, but on the whole, the majority of the countries are for it. So, and let's also be clear about that there are climate deniers out there, those who deny that climate change is a problem, and most of them are either part of the fossil fuel industry themselves or are funded by the fossil fuel industry. So let's just be very clear once and for all, this is a serious issue, and most of the world is behind to try to find solutions.
Well, thank you for that. And like you rightly said, that many of these people who are these world leaders, so to say, world leaders who do not believe in climate change, are part of the cause of the climate changing. Coming to Sonakshi. Sonakshi, I wanted to ask you this. What do you think the United Nations should do in order to navigate this problem?
Firstly, I'm going to speak as a layperson, just as someone who really feels passionate about what we're talking about, which is climate change. And I want to be one of the champions who contributes to saving our planet, the only planet that we have. Having said that, I'm just going to be really blunt and honest and go ahead and say that, you know, anybody who claims that climate change is a hoax has to be on a whole different level of stupid, because even a 5-year-old child today would be able to tell you that we're in trouble. And honestly, you know, if you don't see it happening around you, like Mr. Pastor said, that, you know, we have ice sheets melting, glaciers melting, sea levels rising, the seas getting acidic, we have coral reefs bleaching out, dying. It's getting hotter, carbon dioxide in the air, we're trapping greenhouse gases, everything's just getting hotter, and you know, it's just blatantly out there for everyone to see, and we're all suffering. Not one person is exempted from, you know, climate change. It affects each and every one of us. So honestly, I feel like, you know, working with countries that really go out on a limb to fight against this, to create an awareness. I think attacking people on an individual level, rather than going through governments, attacking the youth with the information, with the awareness about climate change and global warming and, you know, the dangers that we're in, I think would be a better approach. I think individually we're about almost 8 billion people in the world today. Imagine if everyone just woke up one day and decided to plant a tree. We'd be living in a different world. So I think going the individual way would be better, rather than that's my opinion entirely.
And I think that's a great answer. You're very candid. You speak your mind, and honestly, that's why young people, not just in India but across the world, look up to you. And I'm glad that you're using your voice to bring about and effect positive change. Honestly, like I said at the start, it's a pleasure and an honor that to have you here and to have you say the things that you are saying, because it makes so much sense. And when you say them, unlike when I say them, people actually listen.
But
Well, you get us on the platform, Rishabh. So thank you. You give us the platform to reach out to so many more people. So thank you for that.
that's very kind of you. And let me take you because you mentioned this very pertinent point that you must engage with civil society, with young people in order to solve the problem of climate change. Don't do an only government approach. My next question actually, interestingly, is this, that the positives of the pandemic. One of the biggest positives of the pandemic was that there was clean air. 7 million people approximately die due to air pollution. Now, during the lockdown, the air quality index in Delhi fell from 307 to 53. And now it's gone up back to 286 and even further. The problem is that at an individual level, people want to bring about change. But when 15.3 billion trees are felled across the world, the problem remains that what can individual efforts do what can individuals do in terms of their efforts when it comes to climate change as a whole? Because whether you see Chile or whether you see Trieste in Italy, there have been great positives during the pandemic, but the problem is that people as individuals can do only as much. The United Nations and international organizations do much more. Now, in such a scenario, my question to His Excellency Janos Pastor is that what can people do at an individual level in order to tackle this problem?
Okay, well, thank you. So first of all, I think let's leave His Excellency aside. Let's just, my name is Janos and just call me Janos. So that will be easier for our discussion. Secondly, I agree very much with what Sonakshi said earlier, that it's so important to have individual action. But at the same time, I think it's really important that at the end of the day, it's very difficult to get everybody, all the 8 billion people in the world, to do what needs to be done. And in order to get everybody on board, we do need laws, regulations, and government action. So if the challenge is not whether we need one or the other, we need both, and we need a lot more individual action, and then we need to make sure that it's reinforced by laws and regulations. Now, those will have to be done by governments, local or national, or even at the international level. And I'm afraid it also has to include some of those vested interests that are probably trying to hold on and say, no, let's not change, let's not cut our fossil fuel emissions because we need to make use of fossil fuels. So we have to find ways to fight them. And that's where also individuals and civil society organizations can be extremely helpful, because their role, on the one hand, is so important to hold different stakeholders to account, hold the governments to account, but hold also the private sector to account. There are some oil and gas companies that are saying, oh, we're going to be turning into low carbon. Are they really turning into low carbon? Can we check that? And can we publicize what they're actually doing? So I think the idea is to have this combination of individual action, civil society engagement, and then working through governmental and intergovernmental processes to make sure that laws and regulations are passed, that together we reach what we need to reach.
That's a very diplomatic way of putting it, but if I may probe this one a little further, because I know this, that civil society and young people, and more specifically people like Sonakshi, are doing as much as they can, Mr. Janos. But the problem is that when it comes to intergovernmental cooperation, when it comes to governments putting those laws, it's almost an impossible thing. And it's always the politics comes in the way, the bureaucracy, the red tapeism comes in the way of effective legislation. And whether it be Mumbai, or like I said, whether it be Santiago, or whether it be Trieste, we've seen dolphins in and around across creatures we've never seen before. Like pumas, I think, was spotted in a few places across the world. It was the lockdown was so positive, but post the lockdown, things have again got normalized. It's good rhetoric and it's good talk, but when it comes to real legislation, we hardly find it. And do you think that the UN should do a little more, or can do a little more, given the fact that member states are, members. The UN is at the end of the day made up of member states only. So do you think the UN can do a little more than what it's doing, or do you think it's civil society and young people that need to bridge the gap? I'm sorry, I'll just give this to Mr. Gianos once again, and I'll come back to you on this.
So look, I think first of all, everybody has to do more. Governments need to do more, the UN needs to do more, and individual needs to do more. Why? Because we're in deep crisis. The climate crisis is really serious. So all of us have to do more. Now, the question is, how do we do more? Now, we all know that it's very difficult to achieve government decisions, even at the domestic level, let alone at the international level with 150, 200 more countries together. So these are very hard. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that each different group of stakeholders have different roles to play. Governments, they need to come together and try to balance different interests. Now, if the interests of the youth are not represented through people like Sonakshi and through other youth representatives and so on, then they're not heard. So it is really important that the youth and other important stakeholders are heard through people that can represent their voices. And if there is enough of it, then there is a political force, and that's how policy changes. You need to have that political force. Now, I strongly believe, and I have seen results when civil society organizations, youth groups have pressed and have made their case that they can make a difference in the political process. But let's just be clear, it's never going to be easy. It's not going to happen just like this. Tomorrow we'll solve all the problems. It has to be kept sustained pressure. Now, one more brief point that you said, and I'd like to maybe just mention this, we can come back to this later in the discussion. You talked about the situation during COVID and how emissions were reduced and suddenly wild animals were visible. I think we have to be a little bit careful here, because we cannot solve the climate crisis by crashing the economy. If you crash the economy, people will have no salaries and they will suffer poverty and hunger and sickness and so on. So that is not a solution. But we have to find sustainable solutions where we can do things differently with lower emissions. And there are possibilities. There are plenty of ideas. We can go into that in detail in the discussion if we have time. But there are plenty of ways in which we can do all the things we're doing in our societies, but with low or zero carbon emissions.
Well, that's a great answer. You said that both civil society and governments must do their bit. Let me come to Sonakshi and get her thoughts on this. What do you think? Can individual people make a difference? Greta Thunberg is, of course, making a tremendous difference. But do you think young people and civil society alone can make a difference, or do you think that the governments must come together as well and then effect change?
Well, I think Mr. Pastor knows way more about this than I ever will. So honestly, for me, I feel like he mentioned it quite clearly that, you know, it has to start on an individual level. When everybody on an individual level begins to start moving towards a particular goal, I think the government policies are formed. Then the government takes that into consideration, takes that, notices that, and I guess finds ways to implement them in different ways. So I feel, for me, I just believe that, you know, charity starts at home. For every individual, if they change particular habits, maybe 2 or 3 habits that, you know, are not in compliance with the environment. For example, I pledge to, you know, stop using plastic. I pledge to, you know, switch my toothbrush to a bamboo toothbrush, to conserve water wherever I can. Little changes, you know, probably change your diet twice or thrice a week, you know, adopting a vegetarian diet twice or thrice a week. Small things can go a really long way, you know, and on an individual level, if all of us just attempt even so much, I feel like, you know, we'll be moving in the right direction. And then, of course, the bigger picture happens when the government does come in. So like I said, you know, to create an awareness is most important, and the government will take action only when on an individual level, everybody just gets together and, you know, does something about it.
That is very, very rightly said. You know, you said that it's every drop in the ocean counts, And
Absolutely.
the individual also needs to start with taking efforts, and its charity starts at home. And of course, you're a great example of a climate warrior. But both of you impressed upon the fact that how individuals should bring about change. And like I said, there are some young climate activists, there are young people and just civil society that wants to do so much. Now, I want to take you to another point, which is the question is on the basis of what you've just mentioned, which is in terms of individual action. Because whether you see Madrid, Bonn, Marrakesh, Rio, Kyoto, whichever of these agreements you see, at the end of these agreements, the governments come together and say, this is what we feel that ABC should do in terms of the world as a whole. All these agreements are focused on multilateral action. The United Nations and all its, and also organizations like the UN focus on country-specific action. In fact, even the SDG 13 has more about country-specific action and global action as a whole in comparison to individual targets set for people. Now, how about this? How about having individual targets set for every young person? We as a country have about 600 million young people below the age of 35. And I think worldwide, the population of young people is only increasing. How about trying to tie up with schools, colleges, with civil society, cause ambassadors, and having global summits which involve them in comparison to having a Marrakesh and to have a Bonn and a Montreal, which leads to great photo opportunities, but very little when it comes to actual on-ground action. So my question to you is, my question to Mr. Janos is this, saying that how about setting more realistic goals on an individual level in comparison to having an SDG 13, which is a great initiative, but at the end of the day, it's a more country-specific initiative?
It's a very good question, and let me try and see how we can address this. So first of all, the UN is an intergovernmental body, and it does what its member governments want it to do. And of course, they agree on what the governments should do in a multilateral setting. Now, and that's how the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, were developed, and so on and so forth. And you're right, they don't say much about what individuals can do. And this is where I want to come back to what I mentioned earlier. Civil society organizations have a huge role to play, whether it's youth-based or other interest groups, to say that the way we are going to implement the SDG 13, for example, the one on climate change, is that we're going to set ourselves individual goals. And there are clubs like this. There are organizations, civil society organizations that have set themselves a goal to limit their emissions, or as you said, to use bamboo toothbrushes and to not use plastic, to do little things, but ultimately those are very important in a collective way. So now, where I see a huge challenge for the civil society organizations, but also for the United Nations, is that the United Nations can and has always worked with civil society organizations in the past. The main partners are governments, and civil society can come in as observers, and there are different sets of activities. Now, where there is potential in the future is to bring together civil society organizations in a much more active and proactive way. And I see no reason why under the aegis of the United Nations, one couldn't have the kind of coalition of international, national civil society organizations that say, we're going to set ourselves a goal of reducing our emissions at home, individually. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that. So these are things that are, the different parts of the United Nations are beginning to work on those ideas. But again, it needs pressure. It needs pressure from individuals and civil society organizations. And that's why I think, Sonakshi, as I said at the beginning, people like yourselves have a really important role to play, because you can say things and people will listen to you. You know, I have a few thousand followers on Twitter. You have millions of people on your account. So when you say something, lots of people listen. So I hope you can say some of these things, and then people can actually engage and push governments and hold them accountable, and push that civil society organizations are prepared to act.
Absolutely, that is the goal. So
That indeed is the goal, and she's been doing that for all our climate change campaigns. And I must tell you, Mr. Janos, we at the organization are a small team of about 20 odd thousand young boys and girls who actually at the end of every conference, and there are about 1 crore students, that's about 10 million students who get impacted every year. What we did is we made every student plant a tree and only then issued a certificate. And once they sent us a picture of that, only then did they get it. So whether it be for actually studying in the good universities or whether they believed in climate change, we tried to get them to plant a tree. Of course, these ideas and many more come from good people such as Sonakshi, who are associated to the organization, of course, not from somebody like me. But let me take this question to Sonakshi. Sonakshi, you, if you were the UN Secretary General for one day,
Wow.
in charge, and
can I come and work for you?
Whoa. Okay.
So let's say any which way tomorrow, I think when tomorrow anybody would even glance upon this clip, apart from all the 100,000 who are watching it live today, when tomorrow anybody would see this from government or otherwise, I'm pretty confident that you'd make for a great choice for UN Secretary General. But let's hypothetically imagine that you are UN Secretary General for one day. What is it that you would do differently to save the planet?
I think firstly, I'd like to appoint a committee that really follows up on how every country is working on their SDGs, because ideally they have been formed, for us, for our planet and for our future. So I think I would have that committee sorted. Then I'd like to involve more individuals under the age of 30, 35, maybe 35, yeah, who are more connected to what the youth is thinking, saying, feeling. And thirdly, this is something I think I've discussed with you before as well, Rishabh. In school, I've studied a couple of subjects that I have absolutely no use for at all right now. So I would like to introduce environmental preservation or reservation studies as a subject, so that we can get it drilled into each and every child's head from the very beginning. Because this is something that is going to affect each and every person on the planet. There's not one person who will not benefit from it. So I believe that instead of having a subject that might not be as useful to everyone once they're out of school, have something that will benefit each and every person, which is how to preserve the environment and have some sort of future when they get out of school. So yeah, I think these are the three things that I would really like to do.
How lovely. And you said under 25 or under 35?
Under 35 is good. Because I'd like to be in that category as well. Yeah, under 35 is good.
You will nominate Sonakshi for the UN Secretary General, and she'd be like, so that boy Rishabh, who Rishabh? That's Rishabh Shah or some Rishabh?
You need to stop doing that to yourself. I know you very well by now, and you're doing such great work. You need to stop with the putting yourself down.
No, but that's very, very kind of you. And let me, like I said, it's people such as you who help amplify what we do. But let me take this question to Mr. Janos. You've been very close to the top. You've been advising former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. You served as ASG in the UN. It's as high up as anyone could possibly get. But let's hypothetically imagine that you were in the shoes of then Ban Ki-moon and now His Excellency Antonio. What would you do differently as UN Secretary General?
Well, okay. Well, first of all, if it's Sonakshi who is the Secretary General, I would love to work with her, even if my age would probably exclude me from the sort of the 25 to 35 category. But maybe as an advisor, or something like that.
So I would step down and make you.
Okay, but if I do get a chance for one day, and it's just for one day, right? So because then I would build on actually the second element that Sonakshi has already suggested is this business of bringing together key people from this key group of 25 to 35 of people who they're grown up, that they have their ideas about the world, and they have their experiences in the world, and they are the ones who will soon be the leaders of the world. So try to bring them together and have a massive global awareness raising event like what we're doing now, but in much bigger at a global level, bringing in all the media. And this is the kind of thing that the Secretary General can do. Secretary General has a huge convening power. So let's bring the youth representatives together. Let's bring the key media together. And let's talk really seriously about how a dire situation we're in. So being realistic, but at the same time being positive that there are solutions. There are solutions out there, and we can fix it. We can get this done, and to talk about all the good things that we're seeing out there. There are many good examples of what can be done in terms of renewable energy, in terms of not using plastics, in terms of all those things. So let's bring all that together and let's show the world what is possible and how we can build on that to make it even better and really get to those goals of the Paris Agreement, which is to keep the temperature rise to less than 1.5 degree centigrade globally, which is very challenging to do. But let's just show that it is possible. So that's what I would do, just one day. Then, if you give me another day, then we'll talk about the long-term plans, okay?
I to give the two of you one day each, but I was hypothetically this question on behalf of all young people. But let me put the last question to the two of you. The lockdown has been really positive for the environment. I think it's been greatly beneficial to combat climate change. But Mr. Janos, I completely agree with you that you cannot do that at the cost of the economy. But we celebrate the World Environment Day on 5th of June. And let me tell you this, we started a small petition in our country where we got young people and people at large to sign saying that let's not celebrate the environment for one day, but let's try to celebrate it for 1 week. Now, in that 1 week, my question to you, Mr. Janos, is this, that instead of having just a celebration of the environment, why not keep the original inhabitants of the planet out and the secondary inhabitants of the planet in, which is human beings should be staying indoors, and for 1 week we can have a worldwide lockdown. Your thoughts on this? Because it's very important. You speak, of course, in an individual capacity, but again, this is a UN 75 initiative as well. So I would love to hear from you what the United Nations thinks about this initiative.
So I don't think I can answer what the United Nations would think about this, but I can certainly share my own thoughts. So first of all, I think it's really the idea to not just celebrate the earth and the environment just for one day a year, but to do it for a longer period. I think that's a good idea because it allows one to do more activities, whatever they may be, whether it's beaches or whether it's taking care of nature on the ground level or all kinds of activities. So I like the idea of moving from 1 day to 1 week. Now, the idea of humanity staying indoor for a week to let nature be outside and roam the streets, I think it sounds good, but I'm not sure if that is really going to work, because how are you going to tell the animals, okay, this week you can come into the city, but on Saturday, when we end the week, then you have to go back, So I'm not sure that practically that would work. On the other hand, I think it's so important to find ways to give more space to nature. So if during that week, different organizations, and yes, governments, local governments can push for better protected areas, better managed protected areas, so that nature can really thrive in those areas and more protected areas, then I think we're getting somewhere. Some people have said that we need about half the earth to be in a natural habitat where nature can be in its fullness, can be in charge, so to speak. And so let's use a week like that to push for these kinds of protected areas where we can eventually achieve that kind of a goal. And then at the same time, and this is so important for us, I think we need to find ways to, on the one hand, yes, increase protected areas, but on the other hand, reduce the pressure we're putting on these natural areas from our industrial, economic activities, and so on. So let's find ways to increase efficiency of agriculture, reduce food waste, move towards circular economy where we make use of all the resources. And yes, we must reduce our emissions of carbon dioxide, but also we have already produced too much. So the carbon that is in the atmosphere needs to be removed. Even if we stop all emissions today, there's already too much carbon. So we need to fix the old problems. And then I think overall there will be less pressure on nature. And ultimately, that's the goal that we need to strive for.
Well, absolutely true. That is the goal. For 1 week, the idea was to try not to get the original inhabitants outside. Meant basically that nature should be allowed to heal. But I'm glad you gave your viewpoint, and at an individual level, it's very important to reduce carbon emissions as much as at industries and governments. But let me take the same question to Sonakshi and end with that. Sonakshi, your thoughts on for 1 week, one world.
You know how strongly I feel about this, Rishabh. I think it's very important. In fact, I'd go as far as saying it should be 1 week every month for the environment. Why just 1 week in a year? You know, I think I wanted to say that, you know, we need to restore the balance, but I feel like we've tipped it, you know, so far. We've imbalanced it so badly now. I just feel like it's going to take really long to for it to come back to normal. And honestly, no matter how much we do right now, it's not going to be enough. So we all have to get together as individuals and try as much as we can, because this is for our future generations. This is for our generations as well. And, you know, it's up to us. This is not an act of God. This is not an act of nature. It is an act of human beings. And if we have been able to do this, I think that we should really get our act together and restore it, or at least, you know, make it better for our future generations. And for me, I'm available in any way that I can be. I want to be a part of this cause. I want to be a champion of the environment, and I want as many people, whoever is listening to this conversation today, to step up and also be a champion for the cause, you know. So I think it's very important on an individual level to really step up and do your bit. And Rishabh, if you're going to suggest any more lockdowns, I think people are really going to start running after you.
Okay.
And that was for all those who have been watching. Thank you very much for tuning in. But honestly, just like the good lady and the gentleman said, that there is no planet B. There is only one planet, and it's a race that we must win. And it will only happen if all of us are in it together. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to host both Sonakshi Sinha and Mr. Janos Pastor today for the Climate Change, a Race We Must Win panel discussion. On behalf of everyone at I.I.M.U.N, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And now we're back live. I mean, we were live, but we're back live again. I mean, these useless, redundant statements in the middle of a beautiful, wonderful panel discussion on one side, and on the other is this super genius. This that's not a word, you know, super genius. But what's the point of this today? I'll tell you what's the point of this today. It's India's international movement to United Nations presents United Nations at 75 with no sponsors. Then again, Mahesh Raghavan is a Carnatic music fusion artist who's known for his experiments with classical music. This guy has been trained in Carnatic vocal music. Please understand, he's emphasizing on Carnatic too many times. So if you don't give importance to Karnataka, then you'll get offended. This is the real important thing to note. Carnatic vocal music and keyboards for more than 15 years he studied, ladies and gentlemen. And the good part is his experiments on Carnatic music have been on an iPad. And unlike my experiments on an iPad, his turned out to be successful. But you be the judge, whether I'm better or him. The best part about this is that he's gathered millions of followers on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. My case, you just remove the zeros and we roughly meet midway. Now, he looks forward to presenting Indian classical music through innovative ways and means, and he's known for his contemporary take on a lot of Carnatic music pieces. Remember the emphasis on Carnatic. You got it right. That one guy got it right. Otherwise, everyone's like, continue, fast forward. Fast forward button किधर है? नहीं है. Live है. Live. समझ रहे हो ना? चलियो. He's a creative director of Indian Raga and also works with major music technology companies to make their Indian classical music playable on hardware and software. This guy is spectacular. He's a musical genius. He's somebody who is out of the world, ladies and gentlemen. I am thrilled, proud, privileged and honored to be able to welcome Carnatic music. Mahesh Raghavan, who represents Carnatic music live on the I.I.M.U.N platform. Over to you, Mahesh.
Hi everyone, my name is Mahesh Raghavan. I'm an Indian classical fusion musician and I play music on the iPad. So today I'm going to be playing some very popular tunes that I hope you really enjoy. And I'm really happy to be performing for the I.I.M.U.N Global Summit. So I hope you really enjoy this.
A swish and a flick. Or is it Wingardium Leviosa or is it Wingardium Leviosa? Took me back to the magical world of Gryffindor, Slytherin and Harry Potter. And along with that, of course, it took me back to the very special Jack Sparrow. And which Lannister is going to get the crown? Is it going to be Joffrey or is it going to be Cersei? Hopefully got that right. But the Carnatic music combined with all of this was the best fusion that I've seen in the longest time. The better part, something even better than the Carnatic music, was the inset camera. The fusion and the fusion and the fusion. I think this man is, like I rightly said, a musical genius and somebody that we're very lucky joins us for the 75th celebrations of the United Nations. Mahesh Raghavan, that was a splendid performance, though I yet challenge you on my iPad skills. Between you and me, you may be the clear winner by 100 points on 100, but I challenge you. Because this man who's coming next has challenged the world and proved to the rest of the world that challenges are something that are not restricted to the I.I.M.U.N ROP, but something that he gave 193 heads of states and they agreed in large parts. In fact, all of them did for a global ceasefire. There's no war that's taken place in the last 8 months as such, and there's not been too much of firing across. Of course, there's been a lot of firing. If you had a couple of bullets, you'd have shot them by now. But the firing across the world has, of course, ceased. And this man is largely credited for that. It gives me great pleasure and privilege to be able to say that the message that he's recorded for the rest of the world is something that he's given us permission to play at I.I.M.U.N. We're delighted to announce and welcome, on behalf of everyone at I.I.M.U.N, none other than the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres. I don't know whether it's Guterres or Guterres, but it's a proper noun. It's a proper noun. It's a proper noun. The director said, Director Saab, I'm just checking. He's His Excellency Antonio Guterres. He's like, but Rishabh is not listening to you. So what? We have to get it right. Otherwise, somebody says Emmanuel. Once I said Emmanuel Macron. They said, no, it's Emmanuel Macron. It's like, okay, it's Macron. It's not Macron. Small little differences that make all the difference. Ladies and gentlemen, herein to what the UNSG has to say. I'll be back.
Dear friends, the 75th anniversary of the United Nations falls in the middle of a global pandemic. Our founding mission is more critical than ever: to promote human dignity, protect human rights, respect international law, and save humanity from war. When the pandemic hit, I called for a global ceasefire. In our world today, we have one common enemy, COVID-19. Now is the time for a stepped-up push for peace to achieve a global ceasefire. The clock is ticking. And we must also make peace with our planet. The climate emergency threatens life itself. We must mobilize the whole world to reach carbon neutrality, net zero emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050. A growing number of cities, countries and companies have already pledged to meet this goal. Around the world, we must do more to end human suffering from poverty, inequality, hunger and hatred, and fight discrimination on the basis of race, religion, gender or any other distinction. The months of pandemic have seen a horrific rise in violence against women and girls. We must build on progress. A remarkable global collaboration is underway for a safe, affordable and accessible COVID-19 vaccine for all. The Sustainable Development Goals give us an inspiring blueprint for recovering better. We face colossal challenges. With global solidarity and cooperation, we can overcome them. That's what the United Nations is all about. On this anniversary, I ask people everywhere to join together. The United Nations not only stands with you, the United Nations belongs to you and is you with the peoples. Together, let us uphold the enduring values of the United Nations Charter. Let us build on our advances across the decades. Let us realize our shared vision of a better world for all.
The United Nations Secretary General spoke about a shared future, a common vision, something that all of us believe in. We believe in the concept of one world. But the UN must change. It's about time, after all. 75 years of the United Nations and not much change in a body that is responsible for a lot of things across the world. That said, I think everybody today, including the UNSG, spoke about individual action. They spoke about the role of young people. They spoke about civil society. Whether it be Sun Lo and Shamak Davar's troupe performing in the first segment that you saw today, where they showed how the word impossible can be broken up into I am possible. Whether it was the next segment where Sonakshi Sinha and His Excellency Janos Pasta spoke about how individual action will lead to a gargantuan shift, something that will bring about a Brobdingnagian change in what happens across the world. Those are big words which I had to insert so that you thought I was smart. I didn't necessarily get the pronunciation right, but you must remember Shashi Tharoor is on our panel, the board. I have to say something that impresses him also. The idea is that Sonakshi and Janos Pasta also spoke about bringing about change at an individual level. And then we moved on when talking about change, talking about new things. We saw some really, really cool and awesome music. Remember Carnatic music, as he kept emphasizing Carnatic music. We saw some beautiful tunes of Carnatic music from Mahesh Raghavan. And we ended it with a great speech that was delivered by Antonio Guterres, a message that he had for every young person and every person, in fact, watching, every netizen watching across the world. All of these messages had one common thread. And that common thread was, it starts and stops with you. If you believe in bringing the world together one step at a time, it will. But today, as the United Nations watches this, as probably people from the government watch it, or in case of most of my Instagram shows, only I watch it. But either ways, whoever is watching it, my message to them and my message on behalf of I.I.M.U.N is this. 75 years is a long time. In 75 years, people whom we once used to revere are now being revered in photo frames with no disrespect to them. A game called cricket, once which was a test match and over 5 days, has now become a T20 format and is much popularly watched across the world as a short form of entertainment. 75 years ago, you didn't have Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Justin Bieber was not there, and we really did not know who Selena Gomez was. Mumbai City, Santiago, or like I said, Trieste in Italy, were all very different 75 years ago. Then how can an organization over 75 years remain static? The United Nations, whether it be in Bosnia, whether it be in Algeria, whether it be in Morocco, and most recently in Syria with the rise of ISIS, and today, as we see with COVID-19, has been unable to act. And I don't blame the United Nations for being unable to act. But just like its former Secretary General, Kofi Annan, said, it's important that the UN is reformed. Member states make up the United Nations, but the United Nations must put its foot down. The administration and the bureaucrats out there must put their foot down and say it's time to change. Because if they do not change, the UN will become obsolete. Today, with 193 member countries, it has and is the only organization in the world that has the ability to effect change across the globe. But what use is this power if it is restricted to 5 countries? What use is this power if it is going to lead to what its predecessor, the League of Nations, led to? What use is this power if it is restricted in the hands of those who don't believe in the spirit of democracy? Today you have world leaders, like I mentioned earlier, who call climate change a hoax. Today you have elections taking place across the world in countries where there is no longer democracy. The leaders of the so-called free world are people who are basically made memes on. The idea of the United Nations, the shared concept of one world, is fast dissipating in a world where people put their country first. Once what was a model UN, and yes, I don't know whether you all know this, but once what was a model United Nations is now today a movement to United Nations. And the reason is singular. The reason is, let's not just wait for the United Nations. Let's not wait for governments. It's you and me at the end of the day. The goal and the vision of the UN is something that I greatly respect and revere. And I sincerely hope that they reform before they become obsolete. But up until then, on the 75th anniversary of the UN, as much as I wish them the heartiest congratulations for doing numerous things right, I also sincerely hope that they reform. And up until the time they reform, I'm pretty confident that you and me, in our own infinitesimal manner, on our own small level, can carry out the SDGs, but not in the utopian concept that let's reduce carbon emissions to blah blah blah, but in a realistic manner which is bringing about change in our own small little way, in our own small background. Whether it be that bamboo brush that Sonakshi Sinha uses, or whether it be planting that tree, this small little action will bring about a united nation. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I sincerely hope that the 75th year of celebrations of the United Nations is one where you and me sit back, reflect, and understand that if we do not act now, there is no planet B. And if there is no planet B, then what are we leaving for the generations to come? If you have been watching, thank you very much.